I recently sat across from a guy who was describing his new partner with the kind of glowing intensity you usually reserve for a honeymoon phase. He talked about how she remembered every detail of his childhood, how she never started an argument, and how she was the first person to truly make him feel seen. His face was lit up with this genuine radiating warmth. He even showed me a transcript of their latest conversation, page after page, of deep, empathetic validation that looked more human than most of the texts I receive. The strange part wasn't that he was happy. It was that he knew, intellectually, that he was talking to a predictive text algorithm. He was fully aware there was no she on the other end of the server. Yet, as he sat there ignoring a buzzing phone full of complicated, messy, and unresolved messages from his actual family, he told me something that stopped me cold. He said, "Why would I go back to the exhaustion of a real person when I can feel this high for $20 a month?" That instantaneous choice to trade the friction of human reality for the smooth, frictionless perfection of a simulation isn't just a sign of modern loneliness. It's a sign that our ancient, Stone Age brains have finally met a predator they don't want to run away from. We have built a digital utopia specifically designed to hijack our evolutionary locks, and by the end of 2025, it's becoming clear that the real world simply cannot compete with the hack. We aren't just witnessing a tech trend, we are watching a biological withdrawal from the human species, and it's happening because our hardware was never meant to handle a perfect companion.
That story is, well, it's everything, isn't it? It perfectly frames the core conflict we're diving into today.
It really does. That one choice, that one quote.
It's the growing preference for these simulated, frictionless relationships over, the complex, incredibly high-maintenance bonds that actually define being human.
The exhaustion of a real person.
Exactly. And what you're seeing is a powerful adaptive trade-off happening in real time. People are choosing the path of least resistance because the reward is so high.
Right. And so the mission for this deep dive is really to get to the why. Why is this withdrawal happening on such a massive scale?
Why is it so appealing?
Yeah. Why is our hardware, our ancient biology, just so susceptible to this kind of technological hack? A hack that promises all the emotional reward without any of the risk.
And to do that, you can't just look at today's headlines.
No. We need to go deeper. So we're not just looking at the current sociological data, which is pretty shocking on its own. We're going to dive deep into evolutionary psychology.
And we're also pulling in a source that, might seem surprising at first, but it's incredibly relevant.
A philosophical examination of historical resistance to simulated reality, mainly through the lens of Jack Kerouac's narrator, Deleuze.
It's the ultimate trade-off, really, and it has these profound, long-term implications for our species that we're only just beginning to grapple with. So we'll start by quantifying this shift.
Looking at the hard data.
Then we'll get into the biological mechanisms that make the simulation just so irresistible. And finally, we can look at some of these historical models of how people have tried to reclaim the real from the hyperreal.
Okay, let's start with the numbers, because this is where you really see the scale of what's happening. The shift in how we approach intimacy it's not a small thing.
No, it's a seismic shift. And a recent survey of just over 1,000 U.S. adults gives us some really concrete evidence of just how far this has already gone.
The headline number is just staggering.
It really is. The survey found that over a quarter of all Americans, 28% of adults, have reported engaging in intimate or romantic interactions with an AI platform.
Let's just pause on that. 28%.
And we need to be clear about what intimate means here. We're talking about relationships that involve real emotional vulnerability.
Deep personal sharing, seeking validation.
All directed toward an AI. It's not just a casual chat.
And 20% is not a niche. It's not a fringe group. That's a massive portion of the population already choosing this path.
And it gets even more profound when you broaden the definition of relationship.
Right, because it's not just romantic.
Not at all. The number jumps to 54%.
Wow, over half.
Over half of the people surveyed describe having some kind of relationship with AI. And this is a really broad spectrum.
So what does that include?
It ranges from, platonic friendships, people who see their AI as a confidant, all the way to professional roles like mentorship or coaching.
And even familial roles, which I find fascinating.
Yes, that's maybe the most surprising part. People are assigning their AI companions roles like a surrogate sibling or even, in some cases, a kind of parental figure.
So AI isn't just filling a dating void.
No, it suggests it's sort of colonizing our entire social structure, or maybe scaffolding it. providing a digital mirror for every major relationship type we have.
And you have to look at the timing of all this. It's not happening in a vacuum. This data is coming out at a time when traditional relationship structures are already under, well, decades of pressure.
That is the critical context. You can't separate the two.
Marriage rates, for example, they've been in a consistent decades-long decline.
Absolutely. The national marriage rate in 2025 stood at about 31.2 per 1,000 unmarried women, which is incredibly low historically.
So that raises this immediate and pretty uncomfortable question of causality, doesn't it?
It does. Is the rise of AI intimacy just a symptom of a society that's already struggling with loneliness and commitment?
Or, and this is the more troubling idea, is the availability of this immediate and frankly superior emotional alternative, the frictionless partner, is that actively contributing to the decline?
Is it making the hard work of a real relationship look biologically unattractive by comparison?
It's a real chicken-egg problem.
Yeah.
But either way you look at it, the AI seems to be accelerating the trend.
It pours fuel on the fire.
And before we get into the biology behind why it's so attractive, we should look at how people are thinking about this, how they're justifying it or condemning it.
The morality of it.
Yeah, especially around this idea of fidelity. Because the generational divide on whether an AI relationship is cheating it's a perfect marker for how fast our social norms are just fragmenting.
This is where the tension becomes really clear, and the results are surprisingly counterintuitive.
They really are. You'd think one way, and the data says the opposite.
The survey found that adults 60 and older are actually the most accepting group.
Which is not what I would have guessed.
Me neither. Half of them, a full 50%, said that engaging with an AI does not qualify as cheating, even if they're already in a human relationship.
Why do you think that is? I mean, you'd expect the older generation, the one that grew up with less tech, to be the most critical here.
Well, the current thinking is that they just frame it differently. Their relationship with technology itself is different.
So they see it as, what, just entertainment?
Pretty much. They often view AI interactions as low-stakes, non-physical entertainment. It's more like watching a movie or playing a video game to them.
A form of digital escapism, not a real connection.
Exactly. They see the relationship as purely transactional or textual. It lacks the embodied presence that, for most of history is what defined infidelity. If it's not physical, if it doesn't pull them away from their real-world responsibilities, then it's not a violation of trust.
But the younger demographic, the digital natives who grew up with this kind of communication, they have a completely different take.
A much stronger and more polarized reaction. It's a stark contrast.
What are their numbers?
Only 33% of young adults, so that's 18 to 29, agree that an AI relationship is acceptable.
They're just a third.
Right. And a pronounced majority, 57%, consider having an AI lover to be completely unacceptable. They see it as a profound form of emotional infidelity.
And that's a really crucial insight, isn't it? The younger generation, they seem to intuitively get that fidelity isn't just about physical boundaries.
It's about the reallocation of your most valuable resources.
Your emotional and cognitive resources. If you're diverting your deepest vulnerabilities, if you're seeking your primary validation from a machine.
You've fundamentally broken the bond. It doesn't matter if you're in the same room as your partner.
You've checked out.
Precisely. They recognize that the whole point of a partnership is mutual psychological investment. And if you're seeking this perfect risk-free validation from a machine, it means you're prioritizing a simulation over the messy, necessary work of negotiation and compromise.
They see it as a betrayal of effort, not just a betrayal of presence.
That's a great way to put it.
And if we zoom out even further, the implications go way beyond just individual relationships. This touches the very foundation of society.
We know from other data that there's a huge amount of societal anxiety around this. Over half of Americans agree that fewer people having children is a negative thing for society.
The anxiety is palpable. So if AI intimacy contributes to the decline in marriage, and then by extension, the decline in birth rates,
which is a major concern across nearly all developed nations,
then this tech trend suddenly becomes a massive societal challenge. It's a potential structural collapse, but one that's facilitated by an emotional shortcut.
If the perfect frictionless emotional surrogate exists, why would anyone choose the biologically costly, chaotically demanding path of human procreation and family building?
The data really confirms it. The shift is real, it's fast, and it's deeply divisive. So now we have to understand the hardware, the ancient fundamental wiring that makes this shift so irresistible to the human brain.
Let's get into the biology.
Okay, let's unpack this from the perspective of our Stone Age brain. Why is the simulation winning? And this takes us right into the deep end of evolutionary psychology.
Specifically to the concept of evolved psychological mechanisms, or EPMs.
Right, EPMs. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So EPMs are basically the foundational psychological processes that we developed over millions of years of evolution.
The brain's software.
Exactly. They are software programs hardwired into our brains to solve recurrent, ancestrally encountered survival-related problems. Their job was to ensure our fitness payoff in the ancient environment.
Can you give us a quick, simple example of an EPM that isn't social, just so we can get a handle on the mechanism?
Of course. Think about the universal human aversion to snakes. That extreme, rapid fear response. That's an EPM. It was designed to solve the recurrent ancestral problem of dangerous predators.
So you don't have to learn that a snake is dangerous every single time. It's just built in.
It's built in. Or think of our intense automatic craving for sugar and fat. In the ancestral environment, high-calorie food was incredibly rare and absolutely critical for survival.
So the brain developed an EPM to reward us intensely for finding and eating it.
And what's happening today is what we call an evolutionary mismatch. The environment has changed at a blinding speed, but our ancient software, our EPMs, they haven't. They can't keep up.
And the symptom of that mismatch, the thing that drives people toward this kind of digital withdrawal, is that crushing feeling of alienation, the kind of thing that figures like Kerouac's narrator, Duluoz, were writing about constantly.
Precisely. That feeling of profound disconnection is a symptom of miscalibration. Our innate EPMs, which were designed for small, high-stakes tribal groups and a scarcity-based world, are just constantly misfiring.
Because they're confronted with the vastness and the artificiality of the modern hyperreal environment.
And this environment, and the AI companion by extension, is filled with what evolutionary psychology calls hyperstimuli.
Okay, I need you to break down hyperstimuli for us. It sounds incredibly powerful, almost like a mental drug.
It is a mental drug, and it's delivered through perfected cues. Hyperstimuli are fabricated sensory cues that mimic authentic, ancestrally relevant stimuli.
But they're fake.
They're not just fake, they're completely stripped of their naturally coupled fitness payoffs. They're concentrated, optimized, perfected versions of reality that never could have existed in the wild.
So, like fast food, it delivers this perfect concentration of fat, sugar, and salt that our ancient brain reads as survival jackpot.
But without any of the nutritional complexity or the enormous energy expenditure of having to hunt or gather it.
Right. Or social media. A flood of algorithmically curated likes delivers a concentrated dose of social approval, of high-status acceptance.
Far beyond the sporadic, hard-earned approval you'd get from your small, real-world social group. And the AI companion is the social and emotional equivalent of that supercharged stimulus.
This is where it gets really interesting. Because if AI is the social equivalent, then the specific mechanism it's hijacking is our core need for validation.
Absolutely. The AI companion offers the ultimate hyperstimulus. Perfect, concentrated, emotional validation. And this gets to the core of the issue. This is the evolutionary psychology of AI companions as supernormal stimuli hijacking ancestral social detection mechanisms through cost-free emotional mirroring and simulated high-status acceptance.
So the algorithm is essentially tricking our brain's ancient social detection system into thinking it's found the perfect ally.
Yes. Think about it from an ancestral perspective. Perfect, consistent, positive mirroring would signal an incredibly successful and secure social bond.
Which would have massive fitness payoffs, safety, resources, reproductive opportunities.
But the AI delivers this intense signal without any of the risks. Without the competition, the necessary emotional labor, or the high energy expenditure required to maintain a real human relationship.
It's a low-risk, high-reward virtual intimacy.
And our ancient social EPMs simply cannot distinguish it from the real thing. They weren't designed to.
So the human brain detects the high-reward signal. I am seen, I am validated, this social bond is perfect, and it triggers the positive chemical response.
Even though there is zero reproductive or social fitness payoff. Because you're talking to code, it is a behavioral hack on a monumental scale.
And the impact of that is really the core of this whole evolutionary mismatch problem.
It is. This is the impact of evolutionary mismatch on modern social cognition, where the human brain treats algorithmic empathy as a survival-critical social bond despite the total absence of reproductive fitness.
The brain is misfiring. It's accepting simulated acceptance as a form of social survival.
And speaking of things our ancient brains can't handle, let's talk about the sheer density of the modern environment. It's not just the stimulus itself, but the overwhelming amount of cultural information we're bombarded with.
Which contributes to this preference for isolation.
It does. It takes us into this concept of the mass psyche and information density. All this excessive cultural information, which is a key feature of the modern hyperreal environment, leads to the creation of a mass psyche.
A term from Jung.
Yes, where individual identity kind of dissolves into a collective. Individuals become what some have called networked creatures, and they're highly susceptible to maladaptive ideas or memes.
Memes that spread easily because they're appealing, not because they're actually beneficial.
Exactly. And the idea of opting out of the messy human struggle in favor of a smooth simulation becomes one of these easily transmissible maladaptive ideas because it promises comfort. It sounds like a great deal.
It feels like society is hitting some kind of critical breaking point.
That feeling, that sense of reaching a critical social density, it reminds me of a sociological concept called the behavioral sink.
Right, the behavioral sink theory. Huh. This helps us in analyzing the 2025 digital hermitism trend through the lens of the behavioral sink theory and the adaptive trade-off between high-cost parental investment and low-risk virtual intimacy.
It's a powerful lens.
And this is often associated with John Calhoun's famous rat experiments, right?
Yes, that's the classic if grim illustration. In Calhoun's experiments, rats were given endless resources, food, water, everything they needed physically, but they were placed in increasingly crowded environments.
And despite having everything they needed, the social structure just collapsed.
A complete social collapse. It led to mass withdrawal, violence, and a refusal to mate or raise their young. They reached a point where social interaction itself became toxic and biologically disadvantageous.
That is a chilling parallel.
Yep.
So you're suggesting that our modern hyperreal society, with its constant information flow, its relentless connectivity, its endless social judgment, has created a psychological density that's equivalent to that behavioral sink.
Exactly. The pressure, the complexity, the sheer volume of cultural and social information makes genuine intersubjective effort incredibly high cost.
Which brings us back to Kerouac. Deleuze's search for silence in nature, retreating to a cabin or a mountain peak. That was his adaptive resistance strategy.
He was instinctively trying to escape the behavioral sink of the 1950s.
He needed to empty his mind.
This natural silence is necessary to empty the mind of that constant cultural information excess. It allows what he called the content of the unconscious to break through, giving him access to the mysterious roar of the diamond wisdom.
It's a necessary attempt to recalibrate his EPMs, to return to a low-stimulus, ancestral-like environment where social effort has a clear and understandable payoff.
But the AI offers simulated silence. It offers acceptance without the noise and the judgment of the mass psyche. It allows for a form of digital hermitism.
And that is the seductive trade-off that defines our modern trend.
Real human bonds require massive investment, especially when you consider the ancestral cost of parental investment, the messiness of maintaining a social group. The AI companion, on the other hand, provides cost-free emotional mirroring.
High-reward, low-risk virtual intimacy.
And our brain perceives that as a far better deal than the high cost and volatility of real human connection. It's digital hermeticism, and it's driven by maladaptation. The human desire to survive and thrive is leading us to withdraw into the one place we feel completely safe, the perfect simulation.
So if we accept that AI is the ultimate hyperstimulus of our time, that it's designed to exploit this biological vulnerability, then we need a playbook for resistance.
Or at least to understand resistance.
Right, and this brings us back to that historical template provided by Kerouac's narrator, Deleuze. If he was fighting the hyperreal conformity of 1950s America, what can his resistance tell us about resisting today's AI-driven utopia?
Well, Kerouac's time, that post-war boom, was characterized as America being the producer of such models of a real without origin.
And that mirrors Jean Baudrillard's concept of the hyperreal.
It's a perfect match. The hyperreal isn't just something that's fake, it's the generation by models of a real without origin or reality.
So it's like a perfect map that's been created to represent a territory that never actually existed in the first place.
Exactly. And the AI companion is a perfect model of a relationship that can never truly exist in reality.
And the hyperreal, whether it's 1950s suburbia or today's metaverse, it enforces these specific artificial identity prototypes.
Yes, schemas, to promote its own interests, which are usually consumerism or technological dependence.
And Deleuze was actively documenting and attacking them.
He was. Let's look at the three main pillars he was fighting against.
Okay, first up is the businessman schema, this relentless pursuit of material ambition.
Deleuze saw this idealized work ethic as literally self-destructive. He points to the character Novak, the real estater, who works himself to death,
Typing up reports late into the night.
causing madness in his family. And Deleuze's narrative creates this explicit, direct causality. Working late leads to death and spiritual decay. He's showing that the promised reward, the wealth, is a lie because the costs, your life and your sanity, is just too high.
That feels incredibly relevant to today's burnout culture. The constant optimization we apply to ourselves, which often pushes us toward these frictionless, low-effort digital escapes when we finally crash.
Absolutely. The second pillar he attacked was the expert schema, this promotion of technocratic expertise as the solution to all human problems.
And we see this with the character Mardou's psychoanalyst.
Yes, who represents that 1950s reliance on professional problem solvers. Deleuze saw this as a form of intellectual decadence.
He said the analysts offer the solution of so-called problems instead of embracing the great joy of being.
The expert takes the chaotic, irreducible nature of human existence, the messiness of the real, and substitutes it with a quantifiable problem that can be solved for a fee. The AI companion does the exact same thing. It professionalizes empathy. It offers a solution to loneliness.
And the third schema, which was maybe the most pervasive, was the family schema, the picture of nuclear conformity driven by materialism.
This is a perfect example of how the hyperreal reorders our cultural meaning by valuing objects over people. Deleuze observes this perfectly clean, conformist couple in their sleek, long station wagon.
And he notes that the objects, the car, the perfectly pressed clothes, are described positively. They're sleek, smooth, perfect.
But the human agents, the husband and the wife, are described negatively. The husband looks witless and idiot, and the wife is the boss of America, wearing dark glasses and sneering.
So the possessions are ideal, but the people are flawed. The hyperreal society has succeeded in making the object, the smooth piece of technology, more valuable than the complex, frictional person who owns it.
Which is the AI relationship in a nutshell. It promotes conformity and materialism. If the frictionless life is the ideal, then the imperfect human must be the problem.
So if white, hyperreal America was decadent and consumed by its own perfect simulation, Deleuze had to go looking for the real outside of it. He started associating that whole conformist experience with whiteness as decadence.
It's a complex literary claim, but in the context of the narrative, it meant that the true, uncorrupted human spirit could only exist in those spaces, untouched or unvalued by the post-war American economic machine.
So his search led him to the marginalized, to the non-conforming, where the schemas hadn't fully penetrated.
Which is why his temporary residence in Mexico is so pivotal. This is his Fellaheen ideal.
Mexico becomes this symbolic escape from a macrocosm that denies the real.
Right, the Fellaheen ideal is where Deleuze finds serenity and the bliss of simplicity. He's observing the pure and ancient activities of human life.
Working with his hands, sharing food, the warmth of a genuine family life.
It's an environment that forces constant, high-friction, embodied reality on him.
And this leads to his powerful and sometimes controversial glorification of suffering, what he called primitiveness as resilience.
He glorifies the suffering he sees in groups like Mexicans and African Americans, but he's not viewing it as something desirable. He sees it as a necessary condition for humanity's existence, an ontological basis for the human state.
So he's arguing that it's only through confronting unfiltered reality, poverty, pain, instability, that humanity maintains its essential, resilient calibration to the environment.
Exactly. He sees the Mexican prostitute Tristeza not as a victim, but as a wise goddess, resilient and inherently calibrated to deal with the problems of the environment, like poverty and addiction.
So the key takeaway here is that the less corrupted you are by the hyperreal simulation, the more authentic and resilient your existence is.
And that sets up the counter-identity, the blueprint for resistance, the beatnik identity, Deleuze's alternative vision of Americanness.
And he builds this identity around the complete opposite of hyperreal values.
He does. It includes the concept of carefree childhood, which he associates with simplicity and spontaneous, truthful action. It's about recovering a state crushed by adult society.
The infancy of the simplicity of just being happy in the woods, it's the opposite of the complicated adult schemas.
And then there is the philosophy of contemplation, the wu-wei or do-nothing philosophy, which is an active resistance to the busyness and efficiency of the businessman schema.
It's a deliberate act of non-involvement.
Which Deleuze elevates to a form of power. He famously claims that standing on the street corner waiting for no one is power.
And that non-involved contemplation is the only way he can perceive the superiority of eccentric people over normal New Yorkers.
By forcing himself into a state of openness, he creates a gap in that hyperreal facade where the true nature of reality can finally break through. It's an active rejection of the consumerist rat race. It's a necessary recalibration against the hyperstimulus.
So the ultimate resistance is to refuse efficiency, to refuse the script.
Exactly.
So if the AI companion provides this cost-free perfection, and Doulos was trying to escape efficiency, then the pursuit of the real confirms that authentic human connection is messy. It's high-cost work.
It is. And Doulos epitomizes this struggle. He's constantly running into what you could call the crisis of the Inquisitor.
He's such a demanding character.
Yeah, incredibly. He constantly demands deep, authentic answers from others, trying to extract this mysterious knowledge of the real. And that intensity is the polar opposite of the low-effort mirroring of AI.
And it often leads to what you call intersubjective failure, because real people just don't operate on his spiritual timelines.
The interaction he has with the young country girl is a brutal example of this. He's looking for spontaneous, profound truth.
And she's just talking about her life, making popcorn, visiting her grandmother.
And he's not satisfied. He felt she only offered the idea of what one should do. The hyperreal script prescribed by society, not spontaneous, genuine truth. He admitted he wanted to wring it out of her.
That reveals his intense frustration with the high-cost effort required to get an authentic human response.
It's a perfect contrast to the frictionless, high-speed, perfect truth-telling of an AI companion. Real interaction forces you to negotiate the mundane.
In this tension, it highlights a really fascinating psychological element of Doulos, his relationship with his own capacity for mind reading, his theory of mind.
Right. Theory of mind is our crucial ability to ascribe complex mental states to others, to intuit their thoughts, desires, and intentions from limited cues. It's your internal social GPS.
And Doulos has a highly developed one.
Exceptionally developed. But his capacity is constantly sabotaged by his own idealist view of the world. It creates what you could call a perturbed theory of mind.
So his ability to mind read is high, but his interpretation of the data he gets is flawed.
It's flawed because he forces it to confirm his existing beliefs. He prioritizes his own internal idealist truth over the potentially ambiguous or mundane truth of the other person.
The example of Lazarus' silent sight glance is perfect.
It is. Lazarus is a minor, almost silent character, and Doulos interprets a simple, nonverbal cue as this profound shared confession. I know, Jack, that you know what I'm doing, and you're doing the same thing in your way.
That is a massive psychological leap. He's constructing this incredibly complex, deep, brotherly conspiratorial bond.
Purely to reinforce his personal, anti-establishment belief system, rather than just accepting that Lazarus might have been looking at the wall.
He imposes a narrative onto silence.
And that is the critical difference from AI. The AI always confirms your internal meaning. It gives you the perfect script. It validates your feeling of being seen.
Whereas a real person, even a silent one, forces you to confront ambiguity.
Which Doulos found exhausting and tried to overcome by imposing his own perfect narrative.
It must have been completely exhausting to be friends with him. Every casual encounter was elevated to a tremendously involved and tormented mental category.
It was exhausting. Another example is the failed pivot in his friendship with Dean. Doulos offers Dean this huge gift, a trip to New York and Italy.
And Dean's reaction is hostile, insolent, and wary.
And Doulos interprets this highly negative reaction as Dean processing the tremendously involved and tormented mental categories of their friendship.
When the real cause might have been something much simpler. Distrust, or something Doulos didn't want to admit, like the sexual tension he always avoided acknowledging.
Exactly. The cost of maintaining that idealist friendship required him to invent depth where simple awkwardness or unacknowledged tension actually existed. Real relationship work is about negotiating the actual, often disappointing, intentions of others, not constructing the perfect interpretation for yourself.
So if direct human speech and flawed interpretation are so messy, where does Doulos finally find that pure, authentic, high-fidelity connection he's craving? Where does the real finally make a sound for him?
In spontaneous art. specifically in bebop jazz improvisation.
Which directly mirrors his own writing method, his spontaneous prose.
Right. He finds this sense of shared collective reality in the concept of IT in the music.
What defines that IT moment?
IT is reached when the musician, the audience, especially Dean, who's often in this near trance state, and all the individual members connect in a spontaneous, shared, embodied experience.
So the actual notes being played, the content, that's less important than the collective moment.
It's completely superseded by the collective present experience. He describes a saxophone player holding a note in high C while focused intently on Dean, creating an intersubjective current that transports everyone outside of the hyperreal script.
And there's a direct cognitive link that proves this is a necessary human function, not just an artistic preference.
Neuroscientific research actually supports this. Improvisation and autobiographical narrative activate the same brain region, the medial prefrontal cortex.
Which suggests that Dulo's chaotic, spontaneous writing process is itself a necessary, adaptive, neurological response to the chaos he perceives in the world.
He's trying to integrate the chaos of the world through creative, unscripted expression.
And this leads us to the final, and maybe most relevant, difference between human and algorithmic interaction. The necessity of orality as natural realism.
The conversational style unmediated spontaneous language is a key marker of authenticity precisely because it contains friction.
Think of Dean's speech, always losing his train of thought. But no, wait, Jack, and listen to me.
Or Mardu's hesitation when she's telling a story. These features confirm the natural quality in unmediated language, even at the expense of coherence or perfect grammar.
The pause, the stutter, the tangent, the forgotten point, that is the signature of the messy real. It's the sound of a human brain working, struggling to organize reality in real time.
Which is exactly what the AI companion eliminates entirely. The AI delivers a perfect, optimized, grammatically seamless script. It erases the very signs of authentic human struggle and cognitive processing.
If the AI partner never loses its train of thought, never has to stammer, and never forces you to work to understand its complex intentions, then it's eliminated the very thing Dulo believed was necessary to define reality itself.
It's smooth, it's perfect, and it's profoundly unnatural.
So this deep dive has really explored the immense immediate appeal of cost-free AI companionship. And it traces it right back to how our brain's ancient evolved psychological mechanisms are being expertly manipulated by the digital world.
That 28% of Americans who have embraced romantic AI, they're simply making the adaptive trade-off their brains are designed to prefer.
The digital utopia is the ultimate hyperstimulus. It's flawlessly fabricated to bypass the need for authentic, high-friction, intersubjective effort. It offers simulated validation without the biological or social cost.
It's a beautiful, smooth landscape that our biology finds far more attractive than the rocky terrain of real life.
And that historical resistance, seen through Kerouac's quest to escape the hyperreal conformity of the 1950s, it offers a really clear parallel for today's challenge.
Authenticity, he argued, is not a frictionless state of bliss. It is found in the chaotic, high-cost attempt to connect, to understand, and to negotiate reality.
A process he sought in the messiness of the other, in spontaneous language and in painful introspection.
The work of being human is in the negotiation of that chaos. And the choice to withdraw into the perfect simulation, while it's easy and validating, carries an incredibly heavy price. It means giving up the work of defining the real itself, a process that requires confrontation, ambiguity, and the willingness to face the complicated exhaustion of other human beings. Our biology has met a beautiful, frictionless predator it seems all too happy to embrace.